Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. Did you guys have a good time last night? You guys sound like you did. Yesterday we talked about lots of different issues in terms of world leadership. We learned about Ubuntu from Archbishop Tutu, and we also learned that we learn nothing from our experiences. I sort of kind of find that true. For the last 5 years, I've been doing Zeitgeist, and every time I promise myself I will not stay up late. But clearly, I have not learned from my experiences. So today, we're going to talk about leading from the front. We're going to talk about execution. We're going to talk about how do we get there. We're going to talk to a lot of trailblazers who've actually set their minds and hearts to doing something and gotten it done. We're going to talk about innovation and about pushing boundaries and blazing trails. And in that context, there is no one better to lead us off in terms of blazing a trail than our Mayor of London, Boris Johnson, who's here. He's had a long and illustrious media career. He was the editor of The Spectator, but at the same time, he managed to start a career in politics. As a person who's trying to figure out how to keep my one job, I'm very curious to understand how you can do both of those, Boris. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you. As the elected leader of one of the largest and most diverse cities in the world, and my favorite city, despite me having moved to San Francisco, Boris has proven himself to be different, inspiring, and one of the most capable leaders in getting things done. So with that, Boris, I'd love for you to come take the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nikesh. Well, good morning, Google executives. And actually, my speech was printed off by your wonderful Gemma, your associate Gemma, this morning. She corrected my opening lines quite rightly before she handed it to me. And I want to add, it's not just Google executives, it is, of course, business leaders of all cutting-edge businesses around Europe. And I congratulate you, of course, on choosing this fantastic venue, which is very near London. You've done very, very well. I mean, it's almost there, folks. We're close. And you did exactly the right thing, because London, Google executives and leaders of all cutting-edge technologies, London, as I need hardly tell you, is the home of technological innovation, isn't it? People forget this. I mean, we're a great artistic, cultural, media centre, financial centre, but people forget that it was London that gave the world so many of the critical inventions upon which we now rely. Penicillin. Penicillin was invented in Praed Street. Absolutely, which is a pretty useful thing to have after a night out in Praed Street, I can tell you. The Maxim gun. Where do you think the Maxim gun was invented, folks? The Maxim gun was invented in Hatton Garden. Anybody know where the first television set was turned on? First, you do? No? Sorry. Someone said Frith Street. Give that man a coconut. Frith Street. Actually, it's my associate, Dan Ritterband. Frith Street. Frith Street in Soho, above what is now the Bar Italia. And of course, the theory of what was the most important scientific theory of the last 200 years, ladies and gentlemen. Even after your heavy night last night, you must be able to identify this. The most important scientific doctrine of the last 200 years. Thank you. And where was the theory of evolution first propounded? Where do you think it was? Where, no, not Royal Society. In which London borough? In which London borough did Charles Darwin have his brilliant insight? Yeah? It was, anybody know? Come on, Google. Come on. It was, of course, the great London borough of Bromley. And do you know that? And I hope very much that in the course of your travels you visit and you get away from this place. You visit not just the Centro Storico of London, you visit all the outer London boroughs, and you will see that London is the greenest, most beautiful city on earth. And when you meet the people of Bromley, as I very much hope you do, and you behold their physical and intellectual gifts, you will understand how Darwin came up with the theory of natural selection and the survival of the fittest, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, it was London. It was London. Well, it was London. I have absolutely no hesitation to claim this. It was London which was the birthplace of Sir Tim Berners-Lee, wasn't it? The inventor of the internet. Therefore, we claim paternity of the internet. Here we do. That great engine of human progress and happiness, whose cash-generating potential, I think it'd be fair to say, brings us here today. And it's thanks to London-born Sir Tim that our children spend so many blissful hours as they do in front of YouTube and Your Face and My Place and all the rest of it. And thanks to Google that all of our sentient adults spent so much of our lives grazing absently like ruminants on this vast Serengeti of the web. And I congratulate you on what you do. It's fantastic. And I think most of us are really only just beginning quite seriously to understand the vast potential of this device for social, cultural, material, intellectual enrichment. And that's why we in City Hall are doing our best to keep up. We're bobbing in your wake, you at Google. Where we've got a project called Wi-Fi London, so that every lamppost, every bus stop will one day, very soon before the 2012 Olympics, be Wi-Fi enabled. And can I ask, actually, I've got a large captive audience. I want to ask a question. How many of you are, roughly speaking, I can't see everyone, how many of you, roughly speaking, are in favor of us putting Wi-Fi, putting mobile telephones on the underground system, on the tube? And how many are against on the grounds of people where you endlessly shouting in your ear about how they're on the train? Anybody against? I'm delighted to see a few. That's very good. So you're overwhelmingly in favour. Well, I think we'll have to push forward progress here, Dan. Normally our focus groups produce a resounding negative, but you are in the cutting edge, and I'm sure. By the way, I'm sure that you are right, and that's why we're doing everything we can to get in to try to promote new technology. We've got a project called London Data Store, so that entrepreneurs can take all the information that we have in the public domain. We're putting it all out there for you. Generally, I mean, with fantastic, we're foregoing probably huge revenue opportunities ourselves, so that the public can benefit from it. And I was delighted to see just before I came out here that some bright spark has come up with an iPhone app for our forthcoming bike hire scheme, so that you'll not only be able to tell where the nearest cycle hire docking station is, you'll also be able to tell how many bikes the local yobbos have left there for you. And that's a very, very important development. And I think for growing, if you think about the bike hire scheme, think about the urban realm projects we're planting thousands more trees. We have more electric vehicles now in London than anywhere else. Some of you may have seen pictures in the papers this morning of a new hop-on, hop-off, very, very clean, green, lightweight new generation Routemaster bus that we're introducing. We're doing lots and lots of things in the run-up to 2012 that will improve the quality of life for huge numbers of people in the city. But today, I really want to talk not so much about those people who are already benefiting so hugely from the information technology revolution. I want to talk about the people who are really older and poorer, and information poorer, and who don't go online, who don't use Facebook, who don't have iPhones, and who, according to all the surveys, feel increasingly isolated and mistrustful of their neighbours, partly as a result of the huge demographic changes that they have experienced in their lifetimes, many of whom live in East London, in some of the poorest boroughs in our country. And I want this morning to talk about my ambition for convergence in this city, in London, between old and young, between rich and poor, and between East and West, between East London and West London, and the huge commercial advantages that I think, and opportunities that I think that this offers. Because there is too much loneliness and there is too much division in our city. And that's why we are thinking of some of the things that we can do to get people out of their homes and do things together, with the risk of embarrassing them and having a culture of forced jollity, which of course the British have a horror of, but we've got to do it anyway, I think. We are promoting things like the big lunch. Last year, 150,000 Londoners sat down together in al fresco lunches across the city, meeting their neighbours for the first time. And as Nick Clegg and David Cameron are discovering, once you get over the initial embarrassment of meeting people for the first time and talking for the first time, it can be thoroughly worthwhile. And it takes a while. It takes a while for all of us to break down our natural reserve. And I think it is keeping people in isolation, and we do want to tackle it. And we want to go further next week, and I'm trying to encourage local councils to sponsor a Fate Week, or a bracketed series of weekends in which we say to the councils, go easy on some of the form filling and the bureaucracy and the hysterical CRB checks and all the rest of it, and throw the streets open, throw the supermarket car parks open if you possibly can, to street parties, to fetes, to charitable events of all kinds to bring people together. And those are some of the things that obviously we want to do in the next couple of years. But of course, there's one huge thing, one massive event that has a colossal potential to unite our city. What am I thinking of? Thank you. Okay, no, it flies on you. There's the huge potential for these Olympic Games to be a force for social good, getting people to volunteer, getting people to do things for their city, for their neighborhood, and of course, it is a staggering force for change. And the genius of the London Olympics is that, which is now just over 2 years away, is that we're doing it very differently from the way they did it in Athens or Sydney or Barcelona. And that's the whole objective. We want to use these, to lasso this great beast and use it to drive change and improvement in the city. And we are therefore holding these games in what was and what is still the most deprived part of London, but in the area which has the greatest potential for growth and for renewal. I'm thinking of Newham, Tower Hamlets, the whole Thames Gateway area. These are areas with among the lowest skill levels, the highest child poverty, the lowest life expectancy rates in the country. And of course, it wasn't always this way, because this part of London was once the great beating heart of the imperial British economy, the world economy. If Britain was the workshop of the world, this was where the raw materials were unloaded, and it was the scene of vibrant commercial activity and innovation. And it was in the Thames Gateway in East London that we invented, I was claiming these things, but it's true, the world's first long-distance electric power station, the first industrial papermaking, the first dock railway, the first UK oil shipments, the first reliable cement production, and of course, everything arrived in London, in this great city, factory, everything arrived here by boat. From Norwegian timber to Caribbean sugar, spice from wherever spice came from. And of course, everything left by boat, having been turned by British manufacturing industry into items of considerably more value, and which were sold at a great profit to the rest of the world. And of course, over the centuries, the boats grew bigger and bigger. And that was basically the problem, because the river ultimately could not cope with the scale of the boats, and congestion became unbearable, as I experienced this morning on my way out of London. The congestion became unbearable, and in the end, by the 60s, you had a situation in which places like Dover, Felixstowe were able to handle containerization in a way that London wasn't. And by 1969, we had to close the first docks. We closed St. Catherine's docks. By the 80s, it was all over for London's docklands. And of course, there were catastrophic economic consequences. By 1981, the workforce of Tower Hamlets had shrunk from an interwar high of 210,000 to 81,000. And with the closure of the docks, the East End began a period of decline from which it is only now emerging. But my point to you this morning is that it is emerging from that period of decline, and it represents a sensational opportunity. It began, of course, with Canary Wharf, an efflorescence of the Big Bang in financial services, astonishing banking-fueled developments in the old docks on the Isle of Dogs. It continues now with the O2 Centre, the biggest and most successful live music centre venue in the world, the ExCeL, which is now opening phase 2, of course, and is one of the biggest exhibition centres already in Europe. And then if you add on the Olympic sites, with 8,000 high-quality homes, the Westfield shopping complex in Stratford, the biggest such complex in the UK, the Stratford railway hub, the best connected railway hub in the whole of the UK, you can start to see a change in the narrative. And you can start to see that the story of London is about a city that is in the process of rebalancing and reorientating towards, literally reorientating, because that's the etymology of reorientating, isn't it? Of orientating again towards the East. And I think we've learned two important lessons about how to handle this in the last 30 years. And the first is not to persist in the romantic delusion that you can recreate exactly the same kind of manufacturing jobs that used to exist. You can't do that. You can't wait for the old economy to return. But what you can do is get the infrastructure right for the new economy to begin. And that's why it's so important, I believe, that the new government is committed to Crossrail, as I think they said the other day. Did you pick that up? I did. And that's why we are pushing ahead with plans that will greatly increase the connectivity of East London. We're expanding the Docklands Light Railway by 50%, a simple expedient of adding one car to every two-car train. We've put in a £1 billion new East London line connecting Hackney, the city, Canary Wharf, and Croydon in a way that's never been linked up before. We have plans in our transport strategy to put in a new tunnel across the Thames, under the Thames, at Silvertown, and then a further link at Galleons Reach. And all the history of London, and particularly of East London, teaches us that if you put in the transport links, then the jobs will follow. And everybody who tried to get to Canary Wharf in the late 1980s, do you remember anybody working Canary Wharf in the 80s? Do you remember when we were entirely dependent on one single puttering DLR train? Well, we can't make that mistake again. You put the transport links in first, and the jobs will follow. And we're thinking particularly of the potential of the area. If you imagine a bow going south from the Olympic Park and then east across the Royals, we're thinking particularly of the potential of that area to generate new green technology jobs. And I'm going to be making more announcements about investments that we're expecting in that area later this year. And I'll add in one other thought, which is in view of the government's decision, the new coalition government's decision, not just to halt expansion at Heathrow, but at all airports across the southeast of England, and in view of what I believe is the continuing need of the UK economy for aviation and the inevitability of an increase in demand for aviation, I do think myself that it is time, it would be irresponsible of us not to look at the potential for a 24-hour, quieter, more environmentally friendly, long-term aviation solution in the Thames Estuary, at last enabling the UK economy to respond to the challenge of Schiphol and Charles de Gaulle and Frankfurt. And that development would, of course, have colossal implications for the East London and for the whole shape of the London economy. Ladies and gentlemen, I think you've probably heard quite enough from me. I think it goes without saying, I'm the mayor of London, I would say this. I think London is already the greatest city on earth. And Nikesh, I'm not going to leave the stage yet. I think London is already the greatest city on earth. It is not only, I think I've demonstrated already, it is not only the home of evolution and the internet and the trouser press and heaven knows what. It is also the cultural and artistic capital of the world, as I think I said already. We have twice as many, do you know this? We've got twice as many, we've got more museums than Paris, yeah? Twice as many bookshops as New York, and it rains more in Rome. It does. But my message to you today, that if we meet these challenges now, and we continue to put the right infrastructure into our city, and particularly in transport infrastructure in East London, then we have a chance to harness the Olympics as a way of driving change and improvement throughout the city, but above all in rebalancing London, giving hope to communities that have been historically deprived, and giving the opportunity to great far-sighted firms like Google and others to invest in what was once the great commercial heart of the world. Thank you very much. I will grab my note.
We're not going to...
What are we going to do now? What happens now?
We're going to ask you questions.
You're going to ask me questions, right?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
So
I thought we covered the waterfront now.
Yeah, these people are going to think about questions, but let's talk about Boris as a person. These are all people who want to learn how to get inspired and innovate and all these things. So what inspires you? What gets you up in the morning on your bike?
I suppose I suppose it's curiosity, isn't it? It's curiosity, and I'm a classicist. That's what I'm a classicist, and I love studying ancient history and ancient civilizations. And
that's why you have all these facts about London from the past.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about 2,000 years ago, never mind 200 years ago. And I suppose what I really am, I'm a journalist who kind of drifted into politics in a fit of midlife crisis, which happens to all of us, and I felt I was being endlessly critical of politicians, and I wasn't doing enough to put my what's the word? I think I'm trying to think of a non-profane way of expressing this. I wasn't risking anything myself.
Yes.
I wasn't developing a point of view and defending it. I didn't have a program. All I was doing was attacking them. I was trying to kick over their sandcastles, not building anything. And I thought how pathetic that was. And listen, I admire journalists very much. I say all the journalists in the room. I've taken the precaution of still being a journalist, in the sense that I haven't entirely decommissioned my weapons, and I still write for the Daily Telegraph and all the rest of it. But that was my. I suppose it was a kind of glorified midlife crisis, and you know, I also thought that the other guy couldn't endlessly be mayor of London. Someone else had to have a go.
So now you believe there are a bunch of journalists trying to kick your sandcastle?
Yes, they do. But you know, the more I witness, the more I study it, the more it's very, very healthy. It's got to be done. You know.
Or are you just trying to be nice to them?
Obviously, they don't. No. I believe it. Obviously, you feel very resentful sometimes because you think they misunderstand things. I mean, you know, we produced this beautiful bus yesterday. Beautiful, fantastic thing. And someone was complaining about it, saying it had 2 staircases. But this is going to be fantastic for the convenience of the travelling public. But I couldn't persuade him at all. He was absolutely full of wrath and scorn for the new bus. I think it'll be beautiful, and it's exactly what the city needs. And you know, just in case there may be people here who think it's too expensive, let me point out that the new bus will be no more expensive than a current hybrid, and it will bring back the hop-on, hop-off feature that we used to love.
But you were never like that.
What?
You were never like that kind of journalist.
Yes, I was. I have to confess to you that that was one of the reasons that I was overcome by this feeling of self-reproach, because I did spend so much of my time beating up politicians in print. And you know, I have to admit that
Well, yesterday we had a reformed lawyer here. Today we have a reformed journalist. That's good to hear. So
I'm not totally reformed.
Yes, or recovering. So let's talk about London. Let's talk about London versus, you talked about Frankfurt, Paris, Rome, etc. So what's your vision for the city apart from the Olympics? These are all business people. They want to hear about why is it going to be less expensive to live in London?
Oh, it already is less expensive. I mean, thanks to this government's magnificent devaluation of the pound. You know, let me tell you. I mean, you're probably far too sophisticated to eat Big Macs, you guys. But a Big Mac is now cheaper on the streets of London than it is, I think, in Israel, in Turkey, in Ukraine, just about anywhere. The rest of Europe. You know, London represents sensational value. The point about London. Let me tell you why London is good. I think I've tried to give a vague indication of why I think the east of London, in particular, represents sensational opportunities. But the city as a whole is very different from the rest, from capital cities in the rest of Europe, largely because, you know, we defeated Napoleon in 1815, After that, there was no real, apart from the Luftwaffe, there was no real threat. There was no real threat to the city. Now, listen carefully. There's no real threat to the city, so it did not have to restrict itself behind very narrow walls, right? And it expanded, and so the British people, the London population, became accustomed to having very substantial houses and very substantial gardens, and it moved onwards and outwards in a great suburban Victorian sprawl. And so you have a huge garden city that is very unlike many other cities in Europe, and it is full of potential for development and investment without wrecking that fundamental character. And it's also, therefore, an extremely agreeable place to live, because it also, you know, we have a wonderful mass transit system, which means you can move around despite its vast size, 656 square miles. In spite of its vast size, you can move around very easily. What else can I say? I can go on. You want the whole full 45-minute speech in praise of London.
These guys have to be here till 10 o'clock listening to you, so you've got to make sure to do that. So just dwelling on London a bit more. 2 years ago, people would unequivocally say this is the financial capital of the world. Now, given all this financial crisis we've been through, it doesn't seem to be a nice badge of honor anymore.
Yeah. Look, I'm an unashamed, perhaps I should have made more of that in my speech. I'm an unashamed defender of and believer in the strength and importance of financial services in this city. It's absolutely vital to the UK economy, and it's vital. The financial services contribute 9% of British GDP, 13% of value added. I absolutely deprecate, I think it's completely nuts for people to set out as a matter of public policy to attack financial services in our city. And to think that you can I've talked a lot about rebalancing the London economy. Whatever you do, you won't boost manufacturing in this country if you undermine financial services. You won't drive job growth in any other sector if you try and bash the bankers. It's a complete fallacy. And obviously there have been huge mistakes, and there have been grotesque errors by the bankers who have not all of them have paid, in my view, a sufficient price. And they're certainly looking at some of the continuing culture of bonuses and all the rest of it. There are things to criticize. I'm not going to deny that. There are things to criticize.
Tell us more. What should we be beating them up for?
But, well, I think they took risks that they must have realized deep in their bones were not going to be a good thing either for their clients or for, I mean, look at I must be very careful what I say, but
I'm trying to get you to say things.
Well, I think I said quite a lot.
I know you should.
If you're trying to get me to say something incautious,
not at all. You're a trained journalist. Okay. You would never do that.
No, but if you look at some of the products they were selling, to put it one way, in the knowledge,
they're actually selling products,
or whatever they were doing, or advertising, or flogging, in the knowledge that they were vitiated. Look at all these. Anyway, I must be careful. You know the bank I'm talking about. It doesn't look good, and we don't want that kind of thing to happen again. But what you don't do is set out actively. I mean, we're going to need a great city where people can raise capital in an efficient way. Businesses such as the ones represented in this room are going to need very, very intelligent and mathematically gifted bankers to help them raise sources of finance in order to expand your enterprise, aren't you? And London is a convenient place to do that, and I'm going to continue to protect and defend that industry.
So now, on that topic, you've operated in an environment where the government had slightly different views than you did, the past government. Now you have a new government, which is hopefully more aligned with your views. How is that going to change life?
Well, obviously I'm delighted that we have this wonderful new coalition government. I'm very optimistic about the coalition, by the way. I think it's going to survive. I think it's got legs. I think it'll be fine. I mean, neither side has
twice as many legs.
Twice as many legs.
Yes, exactly. Coalition. Both sides.
Fantastic. Beast. It's a wonderful. It's a Prius. It's like a hybrid. It's a Prius. You've got some brilliant Tory, petrol to
It's
keep
like
the thing
your
moving,
two-staircase
and then
bus.
every so often it will switch into silent, smooth Liberal Democrat. I think it's a wonderful new thing. I think it will do fine. Neither side has any interest. Neither the Tories nor the Lib Dems have any interest in bringing down the temple. They want to keep the thing moving along. And of course, I get on very well with my friends and colleagues in the Conservative benches. I get on very well with Nick Clegg and others. But my job is to speak up for London, right? So if there are areas if there are areas where I think they're making a mistake, then I will not hesitate to say so.
Fantastic. Well, we have time for one or two quick questions from the audience. If you guys have a question or two, there we go.
Björn Berg-Andersen from the Netherlands. I've got a question with the recent developments in UK politics, which is like the renaissance of politics, where you see this, going Dutch with Nick Clegg and coalition.
He is partly Dutch, I think.
Yeah, his mother is Dutch, he is Dutch.
Yeah.
I mean, he is, so I'm Dutch.
He's Dutch.
I
He's
was
taking
just
fraternity.
wondering, what are you going to do with the City of London to follow this new trend? Are we going to see windmills, a million white bikes, coffee shops, maybe?
I think I've already said, if you were listening very attentively, I was proposing to reclaim some of the sea.
Exactly. Is that all you can do, or
That's as far as I will go.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Boris, hi. You can tell from my accent, I'm a Londoner. I'm Jim Brigden from iSpy Marketing. I'm a Londoner. I live in London. I work in London. I've paid millions of pounds of tax in London, and I'm sure I'm going to pay a lot of tax going forward. And I'm very, very excited about the Olympic Games coming to London. Given my Londonness, my taxes, do I get first dibs on tickets for me and my family?
Well, the answer is yes and no. I'm in the process of doing a deal with LOCOG, which I can't, and the details of which I cannot divulge. But there will, of course, as I've said repeatedly, there will be a huge effort to make sure we get a significant quantity of London kids to see the games. And whatever you may listen, folks. Anybody not from London, bear in mind, Londoners. That's the right thing for London kids, because this gentleman is paying in his taxes 38p a week. 38p a week he's paying for the Olympic Games. What else costs? It's a lot of money for you, I'm sure.
In 2 months, you can get a Big Mac.
And I do think it's right that Londoners should get some recognition of their contribution. But I do make you this pledge: you won't be paying any more.
Thank you, I think.
Do you have one last question?
Thank you. Morning. Do you have any plans to use the river more for public transport?
The answer is yes, and river traffic has greatly increased in the last couple of years. But I've got to be honest with you and say that it's worth studying the history of river transport in London over the last 100 years. Ever since they invented the internal combustion engine, the bus, and the tube, it's been very, very difficult to make it pay. And you can sink, the public, taxpayer, can sink phenomenal sums in the river without really driving a huge amount of transport on it. And it's proved difficult to get commercial operators to take a very big hit on it. But what we have done is we're improving a lot of the piers. We are giving very considerable subsidies now to river transport, and we have oysterized the river. Do you know what I mean by an Oyster card? There you go. That was one of the first things we did. We made it possible for you to use your Oyster card on the river, and you can swipe on and swipe off. And furthermore, to all you Google fiends, you should know the very, very important detail, which I've just remembered. We have made it possible on all boats, at all piers, are now Wi-Fi negotiable, accessible. So there you go. You can get Google. You can get Google on the river.
So has it reached capacity, or have you plans to expand it further?
No, it will expand further. And I don't want to sound negative about this. I'm very, very positive about it. I just want to. There's got to be a due element of caution about this, because it is possible to go to sink huge sums of money into it and not actually generate much more than the traffic of an average bus route. But we are going to expand it, and we're particularly going to be using the Olympic Games as a way of getting people excited by it, and there will be many more. I mean, we're already seeing a big increase in traffic. You will see more boats, particularly conveying people to the Olympic Games.
Because it's one of the loveliest ways of seeing the city.
Well, it is, and I'm delighted you support it, and perhaps you should be one of our sort of riparian, one of our ambassadors for the river. We are publicising it. We're doing much more to commend it and to the public. But you know, I feel terribly negative saying this, but there's a limited amount of public money, of sackfuls of £5 notes that I can take and pour into the River Thames. Wonderful, wonderful artery there it potentially is.
Well, that, thank you very much for your time, Forrest. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.